All right, well, good morning to everybody that's watching online as well with us. And we're going to continue this morning in Pilgrim's Progress, reading through Pilgrim's Progress. We're going to pick up with Christian and Faithful. They meet up with Evangelist again, having already dealt with that character Talkative, in which, and I think you saw, there's many very practical lessons to learn in regard to Talkative and Bunyan's insight into that kind of a person. So, and then they're going to be headed, of course, to the city of Vanity, where Vanity Fair is, which is representative of the world, the fallen world in which we live. I wanted to start off, though, with you've got copies of this J.C. Ryle. You don't have them here, but we attached them to the handout copies of the sermon, so you'll be able to see them. I'm going to refer to this scripture also in passing, kind of by way of illustration in the sermon, but I wanted to elaborate on it a little bit more this morning before we get to Pilgrim's Progress. So here's this really interesting little passage in 2 Kings. It's in 2 Kings chapter 2, and it goes like this, and J.C. Ryle starts out his article this way. It's entitled The Two Bears. The Two Bears, and here's the verses on it. From there, Elisha went up to Bethel. Now, he had just done a great thing for, I don't know whether it was Jericho or some city there, but they didn't have good water. And he miraculously tossed some salt into it and purified the water there. And so he had the Lord had used him to do a great blessing to the people. Well, right after that, here comes these punks, I guess we'd call them, mocking kids that are mocking him. So here it goes. From there, Elisha went up to Bethel. As he was walking along the road, some little children. I noticed the ESV has some small boys. All right. So anyway, some little children came out of the city and mocked him. And they're saying, "Go on up, you bald head." So here's this insult to him, maybe because he was advanced age. I don't know where they get the name bald head or whatever. And it appears that "go on up" might be a mocking reference to the fact that Elijah had ascended to heaven. Remember, the Lord had taken him up, and so maybe they're daring him to do something like. Anyway, they're mocking him, and he turned around, looked at them, and now at this point, if we just pause there, if maybe we hadn't read what do you think most people would say the proper reaction to that would be? If somebody was going to tell you, well, as a Christian, here's how you should respond to, after all, they're just kids, right? This is how you should respond to that. Well, how do you think most people would advise us as to how to respond to kids like that?
Just ignore them. They're just being kids.
Yeah, they're just kids. See, that's why I'm referring to it in the sermon, because I'm going to be talking this morning about the sinfulness of sin and how we tend to minimize it. All right, so Elisha didn't do that. He turned around and he looked at them and called down a curse on them in the name of the Lord. And then you know what happened. 2 female bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the children. And then Ryle goes on to, this is in a book, Stories for Children. It's in a book. There it is, Stories for Children. And he starts off, "Dear children, did you ever see a bear? Perhaps not. there's no wild bears in this country. That's in England, they killed them all off. But he goes on, and you can read it. Like I said, there'll be a copy of it attached to your sermon handout. But he says that just think for a moment how wicked these children were. They lived in a town where they might have learned better things because there was a school of prophets there at Bethel, the town they were in. But I'm afraid they'd not used their opportunities and had loved play better than their lessons. They had no business to mock at Elisha and treat him so badly. He'd done them no harm, had never been unkind to them. He was a godly man and one who was their best friend. And above all, they ought not to have said, go on up and get away. They ought to rather have said, stay with us and teach us the way to heaven. It's sad to see to what lengths of wickedness even little children may go, and it's sad to see how sinful boys and girls may become and what naughty things they will say. We minimize the word naughty, right? Even when they live so close to a school. Now, school in those days, of course, taught much more faithful in teaching religion. So, and what happened as soon as Elisha had spoken? At once, 2 female bears came rushing out of the woods and attacked these wicked children, tearing and killing all that they caught. And then he goes on to describe it. And here's the point that we need to get a hold of that Ryle points out. And he draws out 3 points. I think I mentioned these before, but the first one really, I think, is the most important. He says, children, learn for one thing. God takes notice of what children do. He took notice of the little children at Bethel and punished them for their wickedness. God hasn't changed. He's still the same. Every day he's taking notice of you. I believe some people, and we'd say many people today, think that it really doesn't matter how children behave, and that God only notices grown-up men and women. This is a great mistake. The eyes of God are upon boys and girls. He notes all that they do. When they do right, he's pleased. When they do wrong, he's displeased. So there and there it is. This is it's a grievous mistake to minimize and ignore sin in children just because they're children. They're sinners, and we all were, and so it's vital for us to understand those things. So sin is sin, and one sin is enough to make a person condemned then before God. Of course, we enter this world and condemned. There's no such thing as the innocent baby, right? It's born into the world. So there's lots of lessons there, and it's important for us. Now, you think about this too. I might be preaching this sermon a bit ahead here, but something like that, and there's other accounts of those similar things in Scripture, something like that doesn't make any sense at all if we don't have a right concept of who God is. If we make God in our thinking to be kind of like a really good man, or like, he's a lot like us, but all the good stuff, that kind of a thing, rather than understanding the incomprehensible holiness of God. See, what happens is if you dismiss that, then sin automatically is minimized because it's no big deal then. So anyway, yeah, take that article, The Two Bears, read it to the grandkids, and get them to thinking about those kinds of things. All right, here we go then. We are at a sentence. I was going to back up a paragraph here. Just before, there's a little piece of poetry there, how talkative at first lifts up his plumes. And this is just at the point when talkative had departed, how he had left. And so, and Christian tells faithful, remember, had faithfully confronted talkative with his sin. You did well to talk so plainly to him as you did. There's but little of this faithful dealing with men nowadays, and that makes religion, Christianity, to stink so in the nostrils of many. You cause the Gentiles to blaspheme because, right? As it does, for they are these talkative fools whose religion is only in word, and they are debauched with and vain in their conversation, that being so much admitted. So, and what he means here is it's being so typically accepted in the church. All right, that's what he means. Being so much admitted into the fellowship of the godly, this puzzles the world. It blemishes Christianity, and it grieves the sincere. I wish that all men would deal with such people as talkative as you have done. Then they should be either made more conformable to religion, they'd either repent, or the company of saints would be too hot for them. Can't stand the heat here, got to get out. Then did faithful say, and then here was that little rhyme verse that we had looked at. So, all right, so here we go. Thus they went on talking of what they had seen by the way. Everybody got it? You got the spot there? And so made that way easy, which would otherwise no doubt have been tedious for them, for now they went through a wilderness. Now when they got almost quite out of this wilderness, faithful chanced to cast his eye back. He looks back and espied, right? One coming after them, and he knew him. Oh, said faithful to his brother, who comes yonder? Then Christian looked and said, it's my good friend, Evangelist. And my good friend too, said faithful, for it was he that set me the way to the gate, pointed him to the narrow gate. And now was Evangelist come up to them and saluted them. He greeted them, peace be with you, dearly beloved, and peace be to your helpers. Christian replied, welcome, welcome, my good Evangelist. The sight of your countenance brings to my remembrance that ancient kindness and unwearied laboring for my eternal good. Faithful said, and 1,000 times welcome, said good faithful. Your company, O sweet Evangelist, how desirable it is to us poor pilgrims. So here's the guy who had presented the gospel to him, see. Then said Evangelist, how has it fared with you? How's it been going with you, my friend, since the time of our last parting? What have you met with, and how have you behaved yourselves? Christian said, then Christian and faithful both told him of all things that had happened to them in the way, and how and with what difficulty they'd arrived to that place. Right glad am I, said Evangelist, not that you've met with trials, but that you've been victors. And for that you, notwithstanding many weaknesses, continued in the way to this very day. I say, right glad am I of this thing, and that for my own sake and yours, I've sowed the gospel, and you've reaped. And the day is coming when both he that sowed and they that reap shall rejoice together. That is, if you hold out, for in due time you shall reap, if you faint not. The crown is before you, and it is an incorruptible one. So run that you may obtain it. Some there be that set out for this crown, and after they've gone far for it, another comes in and takes it from them. Hold fast, therefore, that you have And let no man take your crown, because he's taken this right out of, what is it, Philippians? You are not yet out of the gunshot of the devil. That's a great phrase. You are not yet out of the gunshot of the devil. You've not resisted to blood, striving against sin. Let the kingdom be always before you, and believe steadfastly concerning things that are invisible. Let nothing that's on this side of the other world get within you. And above all, look carefully to your own hearts and to the lusts thereof. For they are deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Set your faces like a flint. You have all power in heaven and earth on your side. Then Christian, he said, by the way, he said earlier, some there be that set out for this crown and then they lose it, right? They don't. Now, of course, Bunyan was a Calvinist. He believed in the eternal security of the believer, that somebody that's really born again is never going to perish, and we believe that too. But at the same time, we're told these things, that we are to, you're not out of gunshot of the devil. Be careful, hold fast, and persist. Persevere then to the end. And I would have changed the some to many. Many there be that set out for this crown, and they never arrived, you see. Then Christian thanked him for his exhortation, but told him withal that they would have him speak further to them for their help the rest of the way. And rather for that they knew well that he was a prophet and could tell them of things that might happen to them, and also how they might resist and overcome them. To which request Faithful also consented. So Evangelist began as follows. My sons, you've heard in the words of the truth of the gospel that you must through many tribulations enter into the kingdom of heaven. By the way, there's a good way, examine ourselves. Are we in the faith? We need to examine ourselves. Do I really know Christ? Am I really born again? Well, Scripture, because this is all references to Scripture. Through many tribulations, we must enter into the kingdom of heaven. And so here would be a question to use to examine ourselves. What's going on in my life following Christ? Am I experiencing tribulations and trials that come my way because I'm a Christian, right? I mean, every human being in this fallen world has trials and trouble, disease and sadness, but it's because I'm a Christian, am I experiencing because of that trials and troubles and opposition? In other words, has being a Christian ever cost me anything? You see, those are good questions to ask. He goes on, and again, that in every city, bonds and afflictions abide on you. That's what the prophet told Paul, right? And therefore, you cannot expect that you should go long on your pilgrimage without them, these trials, in some sort or other. You've found something of the truth of these testimonies upon you already, and more will immediately follow. For now, as you see, you're almost out of this wilderness, and therefore you will soon come into a town that you will by and by see before you. And in that town, you will hardly be beset with enemies. I think that means you will be beset hardly, or with great vigor, with enemies who will strain hard, but they will kill you. And be sure that one or both of you must seal the testimony which you hold with blood. But be faithful unto death, and the king will give you a crown of life. He that shall die there, although his death will be unnatural, like martyred, and his pain perhaps great, yet he will yet have the better of his fellow, of his companion. Not only because he will arrive at the celestial cities the soonest, but because he will escape many miseries that the other will meet with in the rest of his journey. But when you're coming to the town and shall find fulfilled what I've here related, then remember your friend and quit yourselves, right? It's like finish the race like men, and commit the keeping of your souls to your God in well-doing as to a faithful Creator. Right? It is only the Christian of whom it can be said he's in a better place. Right? It is a great line. It's told at funerals all the time, even in churches, right? Well, they're in a better place. Well, if they died dead in their sins without Christ, they're in a far worse place. They're not in a better place. And to say that of someone that lived an ungodly life is a lie. And so, but it is the Christian. It's also only the Christian that we can, when they die, that we can properly say, rest in peace. Rest in peace. Because there isn't any peace or rest for the wicked, right? And so we don't want to be people that get sucked into that kind of talk, just flippantly. Well, they're in a better place. Really? If they're a Christian, then fine. All right, then. Now I lost my place again here. So then I saw in my dream, thanks, Ann. She's paying attention even if I'm not. Then I saw in my dream that when they were got out of the wilderness, they presently saw a town before them. The name of that town is Vanity. So what does vanity mean? Vanity means, it's got a lot of different nuances, doesn't it? Because you can talk about a vain person, they're puffed up, but when we say something is vanity,
it has no lasting value.
Yeah, it's worthless. No lasting value. That's a great way to put it. No lasting value. Emptiness. Emptiness. What is it? The book of Lamentations that's full of that word. Yeah, right. So the name of the town is Vanity, and at the town there is a fair kept called Vanity Fair. It's kept all year long, and it bears the name of Vanity Fair because the town where it's kept is lighter than vanity, and also because all that is sold there, all that is there sold or that come there is vanity, emptiness, worthlessness. As is the saying of the wise, all that come is vanity. Well, I had it wrong. I said Lamentations. It's Ecclesiastes. It's Ecclesiastes, yeah. Okay, this fair is no newly erected business, but a thing of ancient standing. I will show you he means origin of it, all right? Almost 5,000 years ago, there were pilgrims walking. Now, by the way, he says 5,000 years because you ever hear of that? I think he was an Englishman, Cardinal Usher, right? Went back through the genealogies in the Old Testament and so forth and calculated that creation had to have been around something like 4004 BC, something like that. So I think that's probably why he is saying 5,000 years. Now, of course, Usher, he's mocked. He's mocked for that. I wouldn't throw Usher away too quickly, right? We live in this world of evolution and stuff, where millions and billions of years. I don't think so. At any rate, okay, almost 5,000 years ago, there were pilgrims walking to the celestial city as these two honest persons are. Beelzebub, Apollyon, and Legion, with their companions, perceiving by the path that the pilgrims made that their way to the city lay through this town of vanity, they contrived here to set up a fair wherein should be sold all sorts of trinkets, worthless, things that are worthless, lusts and temptations. And then it should last all year long. Therefore, at this fair are all such merchandise sold as houses, lands, trades, places, honors, preferments and titles, countries and kingdoms, lusts, pleasures and delights of all sorts, as whores, bawds. I wonder what a bawd is, B-A-W-D, I don't know. Wives, husbands, children, masters, servants, lives, blood, body, soul, silver, gold, pearls, precious stones, and whatnot. And moreover, at this fair, there is at all times to be seen jugglings and cheats and games and plays, fools and apes and knaves and rogues, and that of every kind. Here are to be seen too, and that for nothing, thefts, murders, adulteries, false swears, and that of a blood-red color. And as in other fairs of less moment, less importance, there are several rows and streets under their proper names where such wares are vended, where they're sold. So here likewise, you have the proper places and rows and streets, that is, countries and kingdoms, where the wares of this fair are soonest to be found. Here's the Britain row, the French row, the Italian row, and the Spanish row, the German row, where several sorts of vanities are to be sold. But as in other fairs, some one commodity is as the chief of all the fair. To the ware of Rome, and he means the Roman Catholic Church, what do you mean? To the ware of Rome and her merchandise is greatly promoted in this fair. Only our English nation with some others have taken a dislike thereat. Now, as I said, the way to the celestial city lies just through this town. So you've got to go through it. That's the point. Where this lusty fair is kept. And he that will go to the city, celestial city, and yet not go through this town must needs go out of the world. Because Vanity Fair is the world, right? The Prince of Princes himself, when here, went through this town to his own country, and that upon a fair day too. Yes, and as I think, it was Beelzebub, the chief lord of this fair, that invited him to buy of his vanities. What's he referring to there?
The devil and Christ.
Yeah, it's the devil tempting Christ. See, he's saying Beelzebub, the chief lord of this fair, invited him, Prince of Princes, to buy of the vanities, right? Yes, and would have made him lord of the fair, would he have but done him reverence as he went through the town. And yes, because he was such a person of honor, Beelzebub had him from street to street and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a little time, that he might, if possible, allure that blessed one to cheapen and buy some of his vanities. But he had no mind to the merchandise, and therefore left the town without laying out so much as 1 farthing upon these vanities. This fair, therefore, is an ancient thing, of long standing, and a very great fair. Now these pilgrims, as I said, must needs go through this fair. Well, so they did. I'm thinking, do you think he means by these two pilgrims, Adam and Eve? I think, well, maybe we'll see as we go along here, but at any rate, so they had to go through this fair. Well, so they did, but behold, even as they entered into the fair, all the people in the fair were moved. Oh, no, he's talking about Christian and faithful, yeah. Because he said, I was just thinking of the two original ones that he referred to earlier. So, okay, so so they go through this fair. Well, so they did, but behold, even as they entered into the fair, all the people in the fair were moved, and the town itself, as it were, in a hubbub about them. And that for several reasons. You ever walk into a room and it just goes silent? No. This is a hubbub, right? All eyes are turned on Christian and faithful. First, the pilgrims were clothed with such kind of raiment as was different from the raiment of any that traded in that fair. The people, therefore, of the fair made a great gazing upon them. You know, it's like, we perceive you aren't from around these parts. Some said they were fools. Some said they were, I think Bedlam would mean lunatics. And some that they were outlandish men. Secondly, another reason why they all turned their gaze on him. Secondly, and as they wondered at their apparel, so they did likewise at their speech. For few could understand what they said. You know, they're foreigners. They naturally spoke the language of Canaan. But they that kept the fair were the men of this world, so that from one end of the fair to the other, they seemed barbarians to each other. And he notes 1 Corinthians 2, or well, it's noted in the column here in my book Bible. It says, you know, that the things of God are foolishness to the natural man. Foolishness. You've experienced that. If you're a Christian and you're talking to a non-Christian, you're talking a different language in many ways, right? Thirdly, but that which did not little amuse the merchandisers, didn't like this at all, was that these pilgrims sat very light by all their wares. They weren't interested in the vanity. They weren't interested in what was for sale. They cared not so much as to look upon them. And if they called upon them to buy, if these wicked people said, buy this, they would put their fingers in their ears and cry, turn away mine eyes from beholding vanity, and look upwards, signifying that their trade and traffic was in heaven. So they hate him. It's a good description of why the world hates a Christian, all right? One time, in fact, Kevin, you were with me. We went over to Salem and visited my dad before my parents died. And they were still living in home and thinking clearly and whatever. But over the years, you know, we could pretty easily sense that as we were following Christ, and they weren't, that the distance was getting greater. And we were visiting with them, and just in passing, I wasn't trying to make any point of it. My dad, he asked something about what was on television or that he had been watching or something. And I said, well, we didn't see that. We don't have TV. And what I primarily meant by that was what we do watch, I just watch online, you know, and so forth. I didn't mean anything else. There wasn't some giant spiritual reason that we didn't have TV. But his tone turned almost mocking, or it's kind of hard to describe. And that, well, why don't you have television? And I can't remember what I said, but he kept pushing the point. You know, why don't, you know, you're weird. Why don't you have television? And anyway, I do remember when we left there that Kevin, you commented, I don't know if you remember or not, but he commented, he said, well, you weren't imagining that They're on a different page, you know. So, but you see that, and I mean, that's not pleasant. My dad and I always got along pretty well and everything, but over the years, there was that distance growing. So, one chanced mockingly, beholding the carriages of the men, you know, how their appearance was and their attitude, to say to them, "What will you buy?" But they looked gravely upon him and said, "We buy the truth." At that, there was an occasion taken to despise the men even more, some mocking, some taunting, some speaking reproachfully, and some calling upon others to smite them, you know, assault them. At last things came to a hubbub, great stir in the fair, insomuch that all order was confounded. It sounds kind of like the riot at Ephesus in the book of Acts. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians, right? Now was word presently brought to the great one of the fair, who quickly came down and deputed some of his most trusty, or that must mean he made them deputies, right? Some of his most trusty friends to take those men into examination, about whom the fair was almost overturned. So the men were brought to an examination, and they that sat upon them asked them where they came from, whence they came, where they're going, and what they did in such an unusual garb. You don't look like us. The men told them that they were pilgrims and strangers in the world, and that they were going to their own country, which was the heavenly Jerusalem, and that they'd given no occasion to the men of the town, nor yet to the merchandisers, thus to abuse them, and to let them in their journey, let them go, except it was for that when one asked them what they would buy, they said they would buy the truth. So here they are under arrest, basically, and they're being interrogated. And one little note here, you know, they're asking them, "What are you doing here in such an unusual garb?" Now, he probably means more than just the way that they were dressed physically there. But nevertheless, I thought, you know, this is a good point, I think, for us to think about. There is credence to the fact that a Christian is going to and must dress differently than the world, have a different appearance than the world. Now, so here you get into, you know, some nuances and so forth that people can argue about, and even Christians might have some differences of opinion on. But we should be able, people should be able to look at us and conclude or see that we're not going the way, conforming to even the outward appearances of this present world. Now, some of that would include proper modesty, but I do, it is my opinion that it is not something a Christian should do to be deforming their body so much that you see so much of today. Saying, well, is it a sin to get a tattoo? No, not in and of itself, but what are your motives for doing that? And, you know, really, I mean, just think about it. If you see somebody and their arms are like all covered with tattoos and so forth, you know, I mean, are you immediately thinking, what are you thinking? Well, what I'm thinking of, there's a person that's going along with the world, right? There's a person that's going along with the world. Apologies if you got tattoos, but there you go. But you can see what I mean. It is what, people will say, well, but God looks on the inner man. Yeah, but the inner man has outward fruits, outward effects. And so, all right, but that's a serious. These people were able to just look at Pilgrim and or at Christian and Faithful and say, these guys are different, right? These guys are different. I'm not gonna do that. So, all right. Well, anyway, there are some things to think about there. All right then. We go on here. So they said we would buy the truth. But they that were appointed to examine them did not believe them to be any other than bedlams, lunatics, and mad, or else such as came to put all things into confusion in the fair. You're a troublemaker. You come down here to the school board meeting and you cause trouble because, just because we're putting trash in the library or something. You read about it in the news all the time today. You're causing confusion. You're stirring things up. Come on, just get in line. Therefore, they took them and beat them and besmeared them with dirt and put them into the cage that they might be made a spectacle to all the men of the fair. Therefore they lay for some time, and were made the objects of any man's sport or malice or revenge. And by the way, I wouldn't be surprised if in England in Bunyan's time they did that as punishment, people, all right? But the men being patient, not rendering railing for railing, but contrariwise, blessing, and giving good words for bad, and kindness for injuries done. Some men in the fair that were more observing, and less prejudiced than the rest, began to check and blame the baser sort for their continual abuses done by them to these men. It's like, okay, that's enough, stop it, type thing. They therefore, in angry manner, the rest of the crowd, let fly at them again, counting them as bad as the men in the cage, and telling them that they seemed confederates. What are you, allies? Are you with these guys or what? And should be made partakers of their misfortune. Maybe we ought to lock you up too. The other replied that for aught that they could see, the men were quiet and sober, and intended nobody any harm, and that there were many that traded in their fair that were more worthy to be put into there's criminals around here. You ought to be putting them in the cage instead. Yes, and the pillory too. That's, you know what a pillory is. That's the stocks, right? Then were the men that they had abused. Thus, after diverse words had passed on both sides, the men behaving themselves all the while very wisely and soberly before them, they fell to some blows among themselves. It's kind of comical because the wicked guys are duking it out with each other out there, in front of them, and did harm to one another. Then these two poor men brought before their examiners again, and they're charged, accused, as being guilty of the late hubbub. You're the ones that caused all of this that had been in the fair. So they beat them pitifully, hanged irons upon them, and let them in chains up and down the fair for an example and terror to others, lest any should speak in their behalf or join themselves to them. But Christian and Faithful behaved themselves yet more wisely, received the ignominy and shame that was cast upon them with so much meekness and patience that it won to their side, though but few in comparison to the rest, several of the men in the fair. And this put the other party, into even a greater rage, insomuch that they concluded the death of these. We're going to kill these two. Therefore they threatened that the cage nor iron should serve their turn, but that they should die for the abuse they had done and for deluding, deceiving the men of the fair. And they were remanded to the cage again until further order should be taken with them. So they put them in and made their feet fast in the stocks. So ultimately, of course, that's what the world wants to do. Kill Christ, and we got to get rid of this. It's too much of a threat. There's a threat to our order here. Here, therefore, they called again to mind that they had heard from their faithful friend Evangelist, and were the more confirmed in the way of their and sufferings that by what he told them would happen to them. They also now comforted each other that whose lot it was. They didn't know which one of them. He told them one of them was gonna die. Therefore, each man secretly wished that he might have the preference. Right? I want to die. No, I want to die. No, I want to be the one. Right? But committing themselves to the all-wise disposal of him that rules all things, the Lord, with much content, they rested in the condition in which they were until they should be otherwise disposed of. Then, a convenient time being appointed, they brought them forth to their trial in order to their condemnation. Now, of course, you know how this trial is going to go. They already made up their minds what they want to do in the first place. So when this time was come, that they were brought before their enemies and arraigned, the judge's name was... Now he gets into all these names. They're pretty interesting how he picks them. So the judge's name is Lord Hategood. So there you go. If you're good, you're in trouble because their indictment was one and the same in substance, somewhat varying in form. The contents whereof with this. Here's the accusation. That they were enemies to and disturbers of their trade. That they had made commotions and divisions in the town, and had won a party to their own most dangerous opinions in contempt of the law of their prince, Beelzebub, the devil. Then Faithful began to answer that he had only set himself against that which had set itself against him, that is higher than the highest. And said he, as for the disturbance, I make none, being myself a man of peace. The parties that were won to us were won by beholding our truth and innocence. And they are only turned from the worse to the better. And as to the king you talk of, since he's Beelzebub, the enemy of our Lord, I defy him and all his angels. Then proclamation was made that he had ought to say for their Lord, the king against the prisoner at the bar, should forthwith appear. I got lost in that sentence. Let me back up. Then proclamation was made that he that had ought to say, I think that means anything to say, for their Lord the king against the prisoner at the bar. Okay, anybody got... so. It's kind of reminiscent of the so-called trial of Christ, right? We're looking for some witness, somebody so we can condemn him, all right? And to give in their evidence. So there came in 3 witnesses, to wit, namely, envy, superstition, and here's one, pick-thank. Interesting. Pick-thank. They were then asked if they knew the prisoner at the bar. Well, of course, they didn't know him. I mean, they'd been there. And what did they say for their Lord the king, Beelzebub, against him? Then stood forth envy and said to this effect, my Lord, I've known this man a long time. If he's talking about one of them, that's a lie, right? Anyway, and will attest upon my oath before this honorable bench that he is, the judge, give him his oath. Yeah. Swear him in to tell the truth. Yeah, right. So they swear him. Then he said, my Lord, this man, notwithstanding his plausible name, Faithful, I guess he's talking, is one of the vilest men in our country. He neither regards prince nor people, law nor custom, but does all that he can to possess all men with certain of his disloyal notions, which he in the general calls principles of faith and holiness. And in particular, I heard him once say myself affirm that Christianity and the customs of our town of Vanity were diametrically opposed and could not be reconciled. By which saying, my Lord, he doth at once not only condemn all of our laudable doings, but us in the doing of them. This has to be also reminiscent of Bunyan's own trial. You know, I'm sure that these are some of the things that he was accused of. And of course, you know, they heard him say once, heard Faithful say once, that Christianity and the customs of our town of Vanity are diametrically opposed and could not be reconciled. That's true. He did say it, and it's absolutely true. And in this case, it would have been Christianity and not only the world, but the Pope are diametrically opposed and cannot be reconciled. And then the judge says, then did the judge say to him, do you have any more to say? And Envy said, my Lord, I could say much more, only I would not be tedious to the court. Yet if need be, when the other gentlemen have given in their evidence, rather than anything should be wanting that will dispatch him, get rid of this guy, I will enlarge my testimony against him. So he was bid to stand by. Then they called Superstition and bid him look upon the prisoner, and they also asked what he could say for Beelzebub, their lord of the king, against him. Then they swore him in, and he began, my lord, I have no great acquaintance with this man, nor do I desire to have further knowledge of him. However, this I know, he is a very pestilent fellow. From some discourse that the other day I had with him in this town, for then talking with him, I heard him say that our religion was naught, it was nothing, and such by which a man could by no means please God. Now see, here again, you have to see this Vanity Fair is the world, but Bunyan sees the religion of the world as Rome. Rome, all right, that's what's going on here. So, and the gospel says you can't please God by your works and for justification. Which saying of his, my Lord, your lordship very well knows what necessarily thence will follow, namely, that we still do worship in vain, are yet in our sins, and finally shall be damned. And this is that which I have to say. So superstition is called superstition because the Roman Catholic Church is filled with superstition. And taking great offense to the gospel that says you worship in vain, you're still in your sins, you can't be saved by that false gospel. Then was Pickthank sworn. See if we can figure out why he's named that. And did say what he knew in behalf of their lord the king against the prisoner at the bar. See these witnesses? It's always in behalf of their lord the king. So Bunyan's telling us the devil's behind this. This is Satan, and these are his spokesmen, all right? His servants. Pickthank, my lord and you gentlemen all, this fellow I've known for a long time, and have heard him speak things that ought not to be spoke. For he has railed on our noble prince Beelzebub, and has spoken contemptible of his honorable friends, the devil's honorable friends, whose names are the Lord Old Man, the Lord Carnal Delight, the Lord Luxurious, the Lord Desirous of Vainglory, and my Lord Lechery. Sir, having greedy with all the rest of our nobility. And he said, moreover, that if all men were of his mind, if possible, there's not one of these noble men should have any longer a place in this town. He'd throw them all out, right? Besides, He's not been afraid to rail on you, my Lord, who are now appointed to be his judge, calling you an ungodly villain and many other such like vilifying terms with which he's bespattered most of the gentry of our town. When this Pickthank had told his tale, the judge directed his speech to the prisoner at the bar, saying, "Thou renegade," I'm not sure.
Renegade.
Oh, maybe an old word for renegade? Probably right. Heretic and traitor. Have you heard what these honest gentlemen have witnessed against you? Faithful, may I speak a few words in my own defense? So, you see, whenever you see the hatred toward anyone who brings the light of God's truth to bear on their true character, on their wickedness and their evil, and the fangs come out, you know. And Faithful said, Faithful said, "May I speak a few words in my own defense?" And the judge said, "Sir, you deserve to live no longer, but to be slain immediately upon the place, yet that all men may see our gentleness towards you. Let us hear what you vile renegade has to say." And Faithful said, "I say then in answer to what Mr. Envy has spoken, I never said anything but this, that what rule or laws or custom or people were flat against the Word of God are diametrically opposed to Christianity. If I've said amiss in this, convince me in my error, and I'm ready here before you to make my recantation." So Mac and I were talking last week, and he reminded me this is a good thing, and I've forgotten this so many times, you know, when people make these accusations and so forth, and so here's Faithful, and what Faithful is saying to them: look, if I've said something wrong, convince me in my error. Pick up your Bible and show me. Show me where what I'm saying is unbiblical, right?
Sounds like Martin Luther.
Yeah, here I stand. And so it would be, and of course, if in fact you're a Faithful, they won't be able to do it. And in fact, they won't even try to do it. And so second, as to the second, namely Mr. Superstition and his charge against me, I said only this, that in the worship of God there is required a divine faith. But there can be no divine faith without a divine revelation of the will of God. Therefore, whatever is thrust into the worship of God, see, this is superstition, right? All the man-made traditions interjected into worship. And what he is saying is, whatever is thrust into the worship of God that's not agreeable to divine revelation, to Scripture, cannot be done but by a human faith, and that faith will not be profitable to eternal life. And third, as to what Mr. Pickthank had said, I say, avoiding terms as that I am said to rail and the like, that the prince of this town, with all the rabblement of his attendants, by this gentleman named, are more fit for being in hell than in this town and country, and so the Lord have mercy upon me. Well, you can see the flames going. Right. Then the judge called to the jury, who all this while stood by to hear and observe. Gentlemen of the jury, you see this man about whom so great an uproar has been made in this town? You've also heard that these worthy gentlemen have witnessed against him. Also, you've heard his reply and confession. It lies now in your breath to hang him or save his life. But yet I think meet or fitting to instruct you in our law. And now he's going to go on and do that. Well, we better stop right there, and we'll see the outcome of this, of course, judicious trial, and see what happens next time. I'll make a little check here. Let's see, what's next Sunday? February something, huh? And what's that now?
Potluck communion.
Oh yes, and next week is Communion Sunday as well. Potluck too. So those of you that are listening online can have your elements of bread in the cup there too and participate in the Lord's table with us. So let's close in prayer. Father, we thank you for this great testimony, which is so reflective of the consistent experience of your people that are faithful to Christ in this present world. We pray, Father, that you might encourage us then when we enter into these various testings and trials and experience the hatred of the world, that this is the course which the Lord Jesus went, and in following him, it's the course that we must go as well. And so we thank you for this and pray this in Christ's name. Amen.